We are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Today's question comes from Vince.
Yes.
Vince, what are we talking about today?
I've noticed a trend, and my question is, why don't movies treat the source material, i.e. comic books, with why don't they pull directly from the comic books a little more? I mean, they have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of stories that come from the comic books, and yet they want to forge something different. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just asking a question so we can talk about it.
Yeah, it's a great topic. Now, are we just talking movies? We're going to move on to TV a little bit here, too? Yeah. Well, I think that we see TV do it more often, especially when you get into animated series, which I think is fair and you have to talk about just because there's so much of it.
Yeah, well, I think that TV would be more likely to do it than a movie would because...
got more space.
Yeah, you have a lot... If you have a TV show that runs for a good portion of time, you have a lot of space to fill up. You have to figure out stories, and therefore you're probably, at some point, going to crack an issue. So, yeah.
Well, and I mean, X-Men and Spider-Man in the 90s both did a lot of that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they would differ from it sometimes, but a lot of times they would have episodes that were named directly after, things that happen, arcs that happen in comics and stuff like that. I mean, like in X-Men, we had, Days of Future Past and, with the Phoenix Saga. There were a number of things like that. I mean, they weren't always done exactly like it, but it was, they would borrow directly from big arcs, and sometimes they would do the arc. Why don't we see it in movies more often? That's really good. I think part of it is because it's a movie. You only have a couple of hours, and so do we really want to see a long graphic novel drawn out, in a movie?
Yeah, I think a 6-issue story arc could be easily interpreted into a movie.
Depends on how dense it is, but yeah.
I mean, I think modern 6-issue story arcs could do it.
All right, which ones? Let's be specific. What should we be seeing on screen? I mean, what is good enough that we ought to see it?
Well, can I really pick out one? I mean, first of all, I'm going to look at the movie that did it well. I mean, obviously, Dark Knight, the movie, drew heavily from Long Halloween.
Yeah, but it still wasn't Long Halloween on screen.
Yeah, but there's a lot of it that was pulled from it. Now,
so you're not saying necessarily that we need to take graphic novels and put them on screen?
I'm not saying we should.
Okay.
I'm saying we should find a way that it works. Like my example here that's in my head.
You're saying we should be borrowing more from the story.
Yeah. Like, for example, they tried to do a little bit of Phoenix, and they tried to do a little bit of the Mutant Cure.
Sure.
So we have two good story arcs right there. We have the Phoenix Saga,
and they did
have
pick
the Mutant
from
Cure.
Good things.
So
yeah,
why didn't you just pick one and at least run with the storyline that came from one of those, as opposed to just trying to create some half-formed idea and then shove it on the screen?
And the Cure thing, maybe even more than the Phoenix thing, because they strayed so far away from the Phoenix thing that it became something else entirely. Because, I mean, it turned into a metaphorical Phoenix as opposed to, an alien entity. But with the Cure thing, I mean, like, that was a long arc.
I'm not saying they have to do exactly that, because that might take a couple of movies.
Yeah, and I mean, like, understand what I'm saying? I'm saying it could have been done well, but I mean, they threw so many other weird things in it that didn't even really mesh very well. That it was weird. But I'm just saying that like there was enough material in the books already that you could have really lifted that and pared it down and made it a good film. I think that's a lot of the reason that people didn't care for it, is because it was a good idea.
I had just a couple more examples. Maybe I'm just jumping topic, but Wolverine Origins, or X-Men Origins Wolverine.
There were a number, and the problem is there's so much Wolverine origin.
Yeah, I mean we have.
Why would we make things up for that?
We have two good story arcs there. We have Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X, which they could have done.
Oh, sure.
I mean, they have the licensing to it. I mean, why not?
And Weapon X is not a real dense book.
Yeah, that's really easy. That's only, 4 issues?
It's
max?
Short, and it's good, and, you could really...
There's room to embellish if they wanted to.
Exactly, you could. So, that's what I was going to say. You could definitely embellish some.
You could make your own... You can make your own movie out of something that's smaller. I mean,
and Weapon X is all about the animalistic Wolverine, which is what people were complaining about with X-Men Origins, is that we didn't get the animalistic Wolverine, and people didn't like that.
Now, this isn't a comic book, but 1408, Stephen King, our movie based on a Stephen King short story, Shawshank Redemption, a movie based on a Stephen King short story.
Right.
So a short story is something that you can take and run with. So we have something like Smith's Weapon X.
The Thing.
Yeah. Why not take it and run with it, as opposed to trying to shove everything down into a small little area? And
to be fair, I mean, X-Men Origins did borrow some stuff from its source material, but it strayed so far away from it that it just became... And the problem is, if it had still been a good story and a good movie, I'm not sure we would be complaining so hard. And same thing with X3, and I mean, same thing with a lot of things where they borrowed some, but it just didn't quite work.
See, I'm not saying that they shouldn't try to break new ground. I'm not saying that they need to draw from the source material.
Well, and you also want them to do things that work well in the medium that they're making. And sometimes there are things that just look good on page that don't necessarily work all that well on screen. Now, sometimes decisions are made, where they think that, and I don't agree with them. You know what I mean? They'll be like, well, the reason we didn't do that on the big screen is because it would have looked terrible.
I.e. Galactus.
I know, I always bring that up. But I just don't think that that was one of those, you know? But sometimes that is true.
Well, I'm just going to say this, if they'd made Fantastic Four a little more like science fiction based and made the characters a little more science based,
it would have been just fine.
It would have been fine, but considering they tried to make it goofy, you do have a point. So anyway, off of Fantastic Four. Yeah. That's like I would say off of Fantastic Four because I get the feeling we just sit there and run with it and debate about Galactus. For
no, it's okay. The problem is we're talking about the same examples we always bring up because we like them and they're funny.
Well, another example.
Yeah.
AVP, Aliens vs. Predator. There are a lot of AVP books. There's a lot of Aliens. There's a lot of Predator.
Why can't they draw from that?
And I've talked to a number of... There's apparently an entire internet community out there of people who are big Aliens vs. Predator fans. So why can't we just draw from... We have World War. We have a new one, 3 World War, which I read the first couple issues of and wasn't impressed with. But still. I mean... We have all of this source material that they could create a good movie out of, and instead they created what was effectively a video game on screen for AVP, and then to my understanding, because I haven't seen AVP Requiem, a very bad movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, I don't know, but I hear things about it.
I somewhat resist the idea of just taking a graphic novel or a story arc for a character and just putting it up on screen. I somewhat resist that, but I guess it's just because we haven't really seen it done very often. Obviously, the big obvious examples of that are Watchmen and V for Vendetta, but I'm talking about take a Batman story or take a Spider-Man story and just put it on screen. And call it, you know what I mean? Like Maximum Carnage, the movie, or Dark Knight Returns, the movie, which has been talked about here and there. The reason I kind of resist it is not because I think that it can't be done well. It's that I'm afraid that it would immediately get pandered by fan bases. That because this kind of happened with Watchmen, and I don't want to debate it with you, but I'm just saying that a lot of people hated that movie before they even saw it, but just because of the sheer idea of doing it bothered them. Don't you think that maybe the same sort of thing would happen if you tried to do Dark Knight Returns or Batman Year One, on screen? If you actually called it that, you know what I mean? Oh, we're doing Batman Year One. We're doing Frank Miller's Batman Year One. That's what we're doing on screen.
I'd like to see how they effectively did Batman Year One.
Kind of, but
you see Year One of Batman.
Yes,
anyway.
But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing.
Oh, but that movie didn't span an entire year. It was a different thing. Yeah. But anyway,
I would like to see a Batman Year One with certain alterations to take a little bit of the Millerness out of it.
Of course you would, but I just think that if you did that, it would irritate people just by the very nature of doing it.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, okay, so
part of the problem that I had with the Watchmen was that they didn't stay close enough at times, and a lot of people say, "I'm glad they changed what they changed."
Well, yeah, and what I say is they got closer than I hardly have ever seen anybody get to its source material on things like that. I mean, as difficult a movie as that would have been to make. And also, I can't help but compare it to what they almost did with it, which would have gone completely against it. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, compared to what we almost got, it's amazing, but I think it's amazing anyway, so whatever. But anyway, regardless of all of that, there are a lot of big arcs that I don't think you could do simply because they're big, cosmic events.
Yeah.
Or they're big comic book events. Like, there's stuff that we might like to see, but we couldn't get enough characters on screen together, so it wouldn't quite work. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't really do Kingdom Come, the movie. You couldn't really do Infinity Gauntlet. You couldn't do Secret Wars. You could borrow things from them, but, we're never going to have a Marvel film continuity that includes all of those characters.
A lot of people want to see something like Justice League, the movie, and I don't really care. It's...
It's not a big deal for me at the moment either.
I'm not saying that I don't want it to happen. I'm saying I don't care if it does.
Yeah, I think it could be great. But I almost think with something like that, with a big team movie, I'd like to see them go for, an arc.
Yeah, I'd like to see something a little more cosmic, too. For something that big, for characters with that much power to team up against something that one of them could feasibly take on by themselves, I wouldn't be interested.
Well, Vince, I think we're out of time. This is interesting stuff. We'd like to hear what you have to say about this. What do you think about movies and TV, but more movies and how close they not just stick to source material, but whether or not they should be borrowing directly from. And we didn't even talk about Death of Superman, which almost happened.
Oh yeah.
And I think part of that was just because that was so popular that they thought they wanted to make it, and it could have been great. It could have been really great, but it never happened. So I don't know. It just seems like the times that it's almost happened, it didn't happen. Yeah, so it's interesting.
I don't know that I'd care to see that as a movie, but
that's because you don't like it as much as me.
Well, yeah, there's that.
But anyway, why do you think this happens? Do you think it should it should stop happening? And do you think that we should be seeing more of that? Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. And if there's something you'd like us to talk about in the future, leave that in the comments as well. And thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince, reminding you to support your local comic book store.
Thanks a lot. See you the next time. Okay, Vince. Your topic. You remember your topic?
Sort of.
All right, let's do it.